The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another, and say, let's see what you're going to do. In giving away the control, you got it. You got the kind of control you wanted. That's to say, where you had a loving relationship to the world, but you didn't have to make up your mind what it should do. You let it decide.
The most important, the primordial relationship in your life is your relationship with the now, or rather with whatever form the now takes, that is to say, what is or what happens. Non-resistance is the key to the greatest power in the universe. Through it, consciousness, spirit, is freed from its imprisonment in form. Only if you resist what happens are you at the mercy of what happens, and the world will determine your happiness and unhappiness. Once you have decided you want the present moment to be your friend, it is up to you to make the first move. Become friendly towards it. Welcome it, no matter in what disguise it comes, and soon you will see the results. Life becomes friendly towards you. People become helpful. Circumstances cooperative. One decision changes your entire reality. But that one decision you have to make again and again and again, until it becomes natural to live in such a way. The decision to make the present moment into your friend is the end of the ego.
Ramesh, if you were to tell me in one word, what is my concept of the ultimate understanding of Advaita in actual life? I say, acceptance. For me, one word which describes Advaita in action is acceptance. Acceptance of what is. Whatever is, whatever I am, whatever the other person is, represented by the respective body, mind, organism, are precisely what they are. So acceptance of whatever is in the moment, to me, is the ultimate Advaita in action. Acceptance. And acceptance, I repeat, does not mean not doing anything. Acceptance includes doing or not doing anything that you think in the moment. Whatever you think in the moment is part of what is in the moment. Therefore, it's simple. Accept what is in the moment. If you are not able to accept it, do whatever you think you should do. And my usual example is about the scene of the baby seals being slaughtered by being hit on the head, which two people saw. One person knew there was nothing he could do, but the other person did think she could do something, and she did it. So again, similar question. How can a sage be anchored in peace when he sees the amount of misery in the world? Again, the same thing. Acceptance of the misery in the moment. The concentrated, is there something I can do? If there is, I do it. If there isn't, I let God take care of His own creation.
If you're walking through the Belgian forest and a snake appears, a deadly snake, and the snake slithers up to you, and you kind of freeze, and it starts slithering up your body, and it wraps itself around your neck. So, does acceptance mean that you allow it to strangle you? No. Unless that's your truth, That's the mind's view of acceptance. That's in a sense the misunderstanding of acceptance is, I should just accept this, I should say yes to everything because that's very spiritual, and oh yes, snake, please strangle me, that's wonderful, everything's okay, everything's perfect, oh this is perfect, oh this is perfection. That's pretending to allow, that's pretense, that's trying to be an accepting person. That's trying to be a very spiritual, very enlightened, accepting person, trying to prove acceptance. Again, unless that is your truth, and that unless you are absolutely aligned with that truth, and maybe some of you are, but that's a very limited view of acceptance. You see, to me that sounds like tolerating. That sounds like tolerating. That sounds like tolerating. I don't really want this to be happening, but I guess I'm supposed to accept. So then people would say, then people would say, well, yeah, but if you fight the snake, isn't that saying no? Isn't that resistance to life? Isn't that that's what's happening? That's what wants to happen, is strangulation by a snake. Isn't that, if you try and remove the snake, isn't that resistance? Isn't that saying no? It's, I think this is a really important point. Out of an absolute alignment with life, out of a total yes to the moment, out of an absolute yes to existence. The removal of the snake can come. So you don't have to be at war with existence. You don't have to be at war with life. You don't even have to make the snake into the enemy. You're not saying no to the universe. You're not saying no to life. You're not even saying no to snakes, the existence of snakes. The snake doesn't have to be your enemy. You don't even have to make this moment into a problem, into a psychological problem, into a burden. It doesn't have to become tolerating. So out of this absolute alignment with the moment, seeing the moment clearly. When there's deep allowing, when there's no war, you may find yourself removing the snake, finding some creative solution. You may be inspired to, remove the snake hopefully in a as kind, compassionate way as possible. So the removing of the snake can happen from that place of no war. There doesn't have to be a war for the removal of snakes. It's a metaphor, by the way. So, in other words, the small no, the small no to this particular situation can come out of the giant yes to life. It's like yes to life, yes to this moment, yes to the existence of snakes, yes to my own life, yes to my own knowing, yes to my own truth. This doesn't feel aligned, this doesn't feel truthful, this isn't something I have to tolerate, this isn't something I have to tolerate. So it's like listening to that little voice inside you that says no. It's not a no to life. In a way, it's the other way around. When we start to ignore that little voice inside us that says no, this doesn't feel right. It's not coming from a mental place of good and evil, right and wrong. It doesn't make the snake into the enemy. It doesn't. At no point do you have to say that the snake is bad. At no point does there have to be a judgment of the evil snake. It's not a fight against evil. It's not a fight against the wrongness of life. It's not a fight against the bad. It's the other way around. It's a listening. It's a listening to your own truth and honoring it from a place of deep acceptance. Otherwise, you're simply tolerating. So it's not putting up with something, it's saying yes to it, as if, I think Eckhart Tolle said this, as if you had chosen it, as if you had chosen it. You haven't literally chosen it, but receiving as if you had chosen it. As if it was yours. As if it was your child. Receiving. And it's from that place of absolute allowing or acceptance or embrace or alignment. That's how the world begins to change. So in other words, we either focus on the 10 million problems in the world, or we become the solution.
Surrender is perfectly compatible with taking action, initiating change, or achieving goals. But in the surrendered state, a totally different energy, a different quality flows into your doing. Surrender reconnects you with the source energy of being, and if your doing is infused with being, it becomes a joyful celebration of life energy that takes you more deeply into the now. Through non-resistance, the quality of your consciousness and, therefore, the quality of whatever you are doing or creating is enhanced immeasurably. The results will then look after themselves and reflect that quality. We could call this surrendered action. In the state of surrender, you see very clearly what needs to be done, and you take action, doing one thing at a time and focusing on one thing at a time. Surrender is a purely inner phenomenon. It does not mean that on the outer level you cannot take action or change the situation. In fact, it is not the overall situation that you need to accept when you surrender, but just the tiny segment called the now. For example, if you were stuck in the mud somewhere, you wouldn't say, "Okay, I resign myself to being stuck in the mud." Resignation is not surrender. You don't need to accept an undesirable or unpleasant life situation, nor do you need to deceive yourself and say that there's nothing wrong with it. No, you recognize fully that you want to get out of it. You then narrow your attention down to the present moment without mentally labeling it in any way. This means that there's no judgment of the now. Therefore, there's no resistance, no emotional negativity. You accept the isness of this moment. Then you take action and do all that you can to get out of the situation. Such action I call positive action. It is far more effective than negative action, which arises out of anger, despair, or frustration. Until you achieve the desired result, you continue to practice surrender by refraining from labeling the now. There is something within you that remains unaffected by the transient circumstances that make up your life situation, and only through surrender do you have access to it. Non-surrender hardens your psychological form, the shell of the ego, and so creates a strong sense of separateness. The world around you, and people in particular, come to be perceived as threatening. The unconscious compulsion to destroy others through judgment arises, as does the need to compete and dominate. Even nature becomes your enemy, and your perceptions and interpretations are governed by fear. The mental disease that we call paranoia is only a slightly more acute form of this normal but dysfunctional state of consciousness. Not only your psychological form, but also your physical form, your body, becomes hard and rigid through resistance. Tension arises in different parts of the body, and the body as a whole contracts. The free flow of life energy through the body, which is essential for its healthy functioning, is greatly restricted. Any action you take may not bear fruit immediately. Until it does, do not resist what is. If there is no action you can take, and you cannot remove yourself from the situation either, then use the situation to make you go more deeply into surrender, more deeply into the now, more deeply into being. When you enter this timeless dimension of the present, Change often comes about in strange ways without the need for a great deal of doing on your part. Life becomes helpful and cooperative. If inner factors such as fear, guilt, or inertia prevented you from taking action, they will dissolve in the light of your conscious presence. Do not confuse surrender with an attitude of, I can't be bothered anymore, or I just don't care anymore. If you look at it closely, you will find that such an attitude is tainted with negativity in the form of hidden resentment, and so is not surrender at all, but masked resistance. As you surrender, direct your attention inward to check if there is any trace of resistance left inside you. Be very alert when you do so. Otherwise, the pocket of resistance may continue to hide in some dark corner in the form of a thought or an unacknowledged emotion.
So that's not powerlessness. That's not powerlessness. That is reconnecting with your the source of true power, which is your own presence, which is life itself. The power that creates worlds, the power that burns as the sun, the power that moves the oceans and grows the flowers, and you are not separate from that power, that infinite intelligence, that flows through all things, that is all things. That's the place where the real solutions come from. We don't have to be at war with the universe for change to happen.
But trust it. If it comes, it is by the timing of the Supreme. And remember that grace is with you. If your choice is for truth, the whole universe supports your transcendence, not just your mind. You don't know how things are going to turn out. Sometimes we are making premature conclusions, oh, this is so bad, and says, just keep quiet and don't wait. Trust in life, and you see. The more quiet you are, the more you see things as they really are. And when you see things as they are, your heart will be filled with gratitude, and you'll grow in wisdom for that. The mind is always acting prematurely, always too quick to make a judgment, and always misinterpreting things. You see. So what may seem sometimes to be life being challenging, if you keep quiet, your mind will open up and work in another way, and you begin to see the beauty that perhaps when you're in so-called a better situation, you would not have been appreciating the much more subtler, much more refined way of consciousness.
So this isn't a strategy to take into the future. Allowing everything to be as it is has nothing whatsoever to do with tomorrow, much less a minute from now. It has to do with only now. All efforts to escape are let go of. All efforts to resolve are let go of. All efforts for the mind to come into a clearer understanding are temporarily let go of. You can always go back to them. No one's going to steal it away from you. But in a moment, everything that keeps you involved in the egoic state, in being caught and trapped and dragged around like a dog on a leash in your mind, is allowed to be as it is. And so, when there's no effort to escape from it, you've denied the egoic state of consciousness the one thing it needs to remain in a trance state. It needs struggle. It must struggle. It has to struggle, otherwise consciousness will start to wake up or leave the trance state of egoic consciousness, all by itself. So in other words, consciousness doesn't need any help in waking up from egoic consciousness. You can't help it. Everything you do to help it actually hinders it. But only everything. Everything. So, do you get the idea? Allowing everything to be as it is. The reason for it, the purpose of it, it's not a strategy to be applied within the mind state. It's not something for your mind to utilize. It's actually something that you apply to get you out of being confined by the mind in that very limited, narrow perspective that your mind dictates. You know, you ever notice that your mind will dictate your perception? Right? It narrows down the field from something infinite to something very, 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 very small, completely predicated on your mind state at that moment. Right? So your options shrink from something that's extraordinarily vast. Your potential to have a very open, wide, vast, unconditioned view shrinks down as soon as you get trapped in the confines of your mind. Your mind will tell your consciousness how to look at something. So even though it's completely counterintuitive, even though it goes against every instinct that we have, it's possible to come to see that the only way to get out of the dream state, the trap of egoic consciousness, is to allow it to be as it is, completely.
That's the secret of the universe. As far as humans are concerned in their present evolutionary stage. The secret lies in simply no longer internally resisting, denying, or running away from what is at this moment, this whatever is at this moment. To find an inner alignment with the form that this moment takes. And the conceptualized egoic entity can't do that. But you can do that. When you see the truth of it, there's the possibility of living in a state of yes to what is, an inner yes. The conceptualized egoic entity lives in the state of no to what is. And that is the greatest transformation happens when there is the shift in you internally from denying the present moment because it's not yet enough, it's not really what I wanted, this shouldn't be happening, I want something else, I definitely don't want this. I want the next moment. It's going to be much more complete. But you always have only this. And then the strange thing happens. At first sight, it seems that the form that this moment takes, because that's all it is, there are not many moments in your life, there's only this moment, ever. But the form that this moment takes changes continuously. Different forms come into that space of now, which is that inner space. Forms appear in the space of now, in your life. A situation, a person, an event, a place. And very often, the form that this moment takes seems to be a limitation. It seems to limit me. I want to be limitless. I want to know myself as limitless. Many people feel that the form that this moment takes how could I accept that? Because this form limits me so much. And this could be where you live, it could be relationships, it could be your physical body. You cannot not encounter limitations in the world of form. You can change, you can have slightly more pleasant limitations. You could be sitting in a tiny little room and saying, oh, I'm so limited here, I want to expand, I want to live in a mansion. And you might succeed. 10 years later, 5 years later, you live in a mansion. You seem to have expanded. And then you sit in your mansion. What now? For a while it feels great. You have expanded because you have identified with the thought form of mansion. You have expanded. But sooner or later, the mansion will limit you in other ways. Your new life situation will suddenly show you there are other limitations. You may become famous and suddenly discover that great limitations come with fame. You are free of the limitations that came with poverty, and now you encounter other limitations that come with that. So, yes, you can play around with different forms in your life and experiment and expand into other forms, not expecting to find the limitless in the world of form and realizing in one way or another the form that this moment takes will be some form of limitation, that it is in the nature of form to be limited. And that's a deep realization. And then the running away from the form that this moment takes, the reactive relationship to the form that this moment takes, isn't there anymore when you see the truth of this and are able to say yes to the form that this moment takes instead of resisting the form that this moment takes internally, which keeps you trapped in your own mental form. So what does that mean? It means, quite simply, you become friendly with what is. It doesn't mean now you're condemned to non-action. Out of that state of yes, intelligent action arises when it's needed, not when it's not needed. You embrace what is, even if it seems very limited or limiting, because it already is. You can't remove is out of existence. You become internally aligned with that. So when you say yes to what is, space arises, so to speak, around what is. This is a way of speaking, but that's all we can do here. A sense of space or spaciousness arises around the form that this moment takes. And that liberates you from the limitations of form. And you cannot find the spaciousness by always running away from the forms that arise, but being with them. Surrendering to the form that this moment takes is the key. The inner surrender, whatever is part of the totality, the web of interconnectedness that is the universe. This event is part of that. There is a certain inevitability to the form that this moment takes. Yes, then perhaps action arises and it changes. You're actually amazed how quickly the form that this moment changes when you don't resist it anymore internally, because a greater intelligence comes into play now. And miraculous things can happen even on the level of form, but they didn't happen when you lived in non-alignment with is. They only happen when you live in alignment with is. And to some people that means yes to the most dreadful limitation, and that is why traditionally it's people who reached that realization found the most dreadful limitation in their life and surrender to that. The archetype of that is Jesus on the cross. This is the human archetype. This is true for each human being. The most unacceptable form of limitation that a human, and you don't need to be a Christian to believe this or to see the truth of it. In fact, if you're a Christian, you may not see it, because they tend to have a narrow interpretation of something that is very deep. So you have somebody a human being in a situation that is a manifestation of the most extreme limitation, totally. And symbolically, the words that came out of his mouth were at first, "Why hast thou abandoned me, God?" The last no. The next words that came were, "Not my will, but thy will be done," which means thy will is the will of the one, not to make it into a mental concept. The will of the one is whatever is now. Not my will, but thy will be done. A complete yes. And at that moment, the cross, which is the symbol of the ultimate limitation, becomes the symbol of the divine. The dual symbolism of the cross it's a torture instrument, and it's a symbol of the divine. And that is whatever may be happening in your life and be the greatest limitation in your life. It is not only the limitation, it's also the opening. When it's not internally resisted, the opening into space. Because space comes with a yes to what is. You are no longer bound to what is. You are no longer bound to the form. You know yourself as the formless, one life, one consciousness. That's the true happiness that lasts. The heart of happiness, the core of happiness, not the superficial happiness that goes and the next moment that's so. Nothing needs to change for this to happen in your life, this transition. Whatever is the best that is for you at this moment. You work with that. Say yes to that. And don't believe the mind when it says, okay, I'll say yes when I get this out of the way. And enormous power moves into your life. The very intelligence of the universe manifests through this form, which then becomes an opening. And it's the end of suffering. The end of the suffering entity. You may still get a toothache from time to time, but that is how it is too. You surrender to that also. Surrender. That's all. No time is required for the shift in consciousness. You can only do it now. Yes to now. And find yourself through that.
There is a power within you which will take care of everything if you let it. By not worrying, by not fretting, by not concerning yourself. I know it sounds strange, for you've been brought up to think, unless I do something, my life will be a shambles. I have to make something out of my life. The truth is you have no life. You never had a life. There is only consciousness, and you are that. What appears to be your life is an optical illusion, a mirage. The things in your life appear to be karmic. That's why you have experiences. But when you find out the game that's being played is erroneous, a joke, it is only a game, you wake up and you stop playing. You become absolutely, totally free. Do not accept facts. All facts are subject to change. Do not stick up for your rights. You have no rights. Be compassionate. Have humility. Have mercy on yourself. Never condemn yourself. Never believe you are inferior or superior. Identify with the higher self. And one day you will automatically let go of everything and become that self. At that time there will not be a world and reality. There will be just reality by itself. And the world will become images to you, superimposed on reality. Images that do not exist. Then you will find happiness that can never vanish. Happiness that can never disappear. Begin to see yourself this way. Not as a mortal being, not as a being struggling through life and fretting and worrying and being upset over conditions, having to make decisions, crying over spilled milk. Here comes these cliches again. Crying over spilled milk. Has anybody ever cried over spilled milk?
Probably.
Maybe a cat. Don't fight the world. There's nothing to fight. And there's absolutely nothing to fear. Be yourself. Be your real self. Awaken. It's about time you knew who you are. Awaken and become free.